Hello everyone, my name is Shankar Rai. I welcome you again to the Indian Polity series. Today is the video lecture number 2 where we shall be discussing the topic primarily focusing on the Indian Constitution, historical underpinnings, evolution and features. Especially for those who have not watched my previous video, I would uh, recommend you people to go back and see the video before you proceed forward. Let us come back. I have already highlighted that you need to follow a couple of reference books, that is M. Lakshmikant, P.M. Bakshi, D.D. Bosu, or Dr. B.L. Faria. Now let us then start with the today's topic. The Indian Constitution's historical underpinnings, evolution, features. The historical underpinnings and evolutions. Now this is where we try to understand how our constitution has evolved throughout the historical time period. All of you know that the East India Company that came to India only for the purpose of the trading, and subsequently they captured the entire India and ruled more than 300 years. So in this particular video lecture on the topic of the historical underpinnings, I'm going to cover the different features, different acts through which our parliament, our constitution has came into the light, starting from the Regulating Act of 1773. Then we have the Pitt's India Act of 1784. We have the Charter Act of 1813. We have Charter Act of 1833. We have Charter Act of 1853. Point number 6, we are having the Government of India Act of 1858. We are having Indian Councils Act of 1861. Indian Councils Act of 1892. Then we have Monumental Reforms 1909. Then we are having Montesquieu and Chelmsford Reforms 1919. Then we are having an important, that is a Government of India Act of 1935. Then finally we are having in the states the point number 12, that is Indian Independence Act of 1947, and hence we became free. Starting the first act, Regulating Act of 1773. You need to understand this is the first step was taken by the British Parliament to control and regulate the affairs of the East India Company. Earlier, the East India Company was not regulated. It came as a company to trade with India. Now, it designated the Governor of Bengal, which is Fort Wiliam, as the Governor General of Bengal. Now, you need to understand here the point I am going to also refer to this point particularly. It subordinated the governors of Bombay and Madras to the Governor General of Bengal. That means earlier there were separate governors, and finally with the Regulating Act of 1773, the Governor of Bombay and the Governor of Madras that came under the Governor General of Bengal. Earlier it was Governor and now it is Governor General. So Warren Hastings became the first Governor General of Bengal. So this is an important point. Often you can be asked the question in your examination. The Executive Council of the Governor General was established 4 members. So there was no separate legislative council. So Executive Council was basically to look after the executive role or the administrative roles. Now for the first time, the Supreme Court was established at Fort William, Calcutta, as the apex court in 1774. It also prohibited the servants of the company from engaging in any private trade. So they cannot do the trade. That means they were not allowed to do the trade without the prior permission of the British Parliament. Now also the Court of Directors were established. The governing body of the company should report its revenue. Whatever the commercial revenue they are getting from India, they need to report to the British Parliament. So these are the couple of important points which I have just told to you people regarding the Regulating Act of 1773. With that, Next that comes Pitt's India Act of 1784. It distinguishes between the commercial and political functions of the company. The commercial that primarily looks into the revenue perspective, and political that primarily looks into the governance perspective. Now, the Court of Directors in the 1774, we have discussed about this point. They were assigned for the commercial functions, and the Board of Control for the political affairs. Please do not be confused between these two words. It is Court of Directors and this is the Board of Control. Now, the strength of the Governor General Council from 4 it is reduced to now 3 members. It placed the Indian affairs under the direct control of the British government. Now, earlier some sort of free hand had been given to the company, but now with the Pitt's India Act 1784, the Indian affairs directly came under the British government. The company's territory in India were called as the British Possession in India. The Governor's Council were established in Madras as well as in Bombay. So these are the couple of points of the Pitt's India Act 1784. Now in the next particular act, that is Charter Act of 1813, the company's monopoly over Indian trade is terminated. Now trade with India open to all British subjects. Earlier the East India Company was having a monopoly. So now all of the trade that is open to the British subjects. Going next, number 4, that is a Charter Act of 1833. Now finally the Governor General of Bengal became the Governor General of India. So all of you know, earlier we tried to understood that it was Governor of Madras and Bengal that is transited to the Governor General of Bengal. Now the Governor General of Bengal became the Governor General of India. So the first Governor General of India was Lord Wiliam Bentinck. This was the final step towards centralization in British India. Beginning of central legislature for India, as the act also took away legislative powers of Bombay and Madras provinces. The act ended the activity of East India Company as a commercial body and it became a purely administrative body. So remember, in the Pitt's India Act 1784, we have discussed that the Court of Directors were assigned as a commercial part of the company, but now this is also abolished with the Charter Act of 1833. So is the case for the beginning of the central legislature which began in India. Going next, the Charter Act of 1853, the legislative and executive functions of the Governor General Councils were separated. Now earlier the Governor General's Councils, they used to look after the overall functions and they used to play the overall role. So with that Charter Act of 1853, the legislative basically to frame rules or the laws, the executive is to implement those rules or laws. They were separated. Now finally the 6 members in the central legislative councils, 4 out of 6 members were appointed by the provincial governments of Madras, Bombay, Bengal and Agra. For the first time, as you came to know, that we are having a central and the provincial government. Central government, it's typically like a union government and the state government. So at that point of time, it was called as the central system as well as the provincial government systems. It introduced a system to open competition as the basis for the recruitment of civil services of the company. That means the Indian civil services opened for all, now which is known as the IAS, Indian Administrative Service. Earlier it was known as the ICS, Indian Civil Service. Coming next, the Government of India Act 1858. Now all of you know about the Great Revolt of 1857, and the British government got a shock from the 1857 revolt as they saw the unity of India. Subsequently, after 1 year, they framed the Government of India Act of 1858. The rule of the company was replaced by the rule of the Crown in India. Now, you need to understand, earlier the company was having or having the power to frame the rules and regulations. So it was completely replaced by the rule of the crown in India. The powers of the British crown were to be exercised by the Secretary of States for India. It's primarily, you need to understand that British government was having different types of secretaries for all of their colonized states. So for India also they are having Secretary of State. He was assisted by the Council of India having 15 members. He was vested with the complete authority and control over Indian administration through Viceroy. Now earlier you need to understand the Viceroy concept was not available. It was the concept of Governor General. Now here we came, the Governor General was made the Viceroy of India. So the Lord Canning was the first Viceroy of India. It also abolished Board of Control and Code of Director, which we have read in the particular act of Pitt's India Act 1784. So couple of important points you need to understand regarding if the question comes in by which act for the first time the rule of crown is placed. So you need to, the answer should be the Government of India Act of 1858. At the same time, the transition from Governor General to the Viceroy of India, that also happened with the Act, Government of India Act of 1858. Now, next, the Indian Council Act of 1861. It introduced for the first time Indian representation. Earlier, the Indians were not getting the privilege to be a part of their council or to be part of their system. Now, with this 1861 Act, Indians' representation in the institutions like Viceroy's Executive and Legislative Council, that is a non-official roles. Total 3 Indians were getting chance to enter into the Legislative Council. Remember, the Legislative Councils were established in center as well as in provinces. It's like a typical, as I have already mentioned in the couple of minutes before, that the union and the state. So earlier it was called as center and the provinces. It provided the Viceroy's Executive Council should have some Indians as the non-official members. So they are not official members, it is a non-official members. While transacting the legislative business is primarily which deals with framing of rules or the laws. Now it accorded the statutory recognition to the portfolio system. Earlier the portfolio system was not statutorily recognized, so now it is a statutory. Statutory is basically by law. Then it initiated the process of decentralization by restoring legislative powers to the Bombay and the Madras provinces. Now earlier the legislative power were withdrawal. Now with this particular 1861 Act, that is Indian Councils Act, again the system of decentralized governing procedure started, and the power restored back to the Bombay and Madras provinces. Understanding the Indian Council Act of 1892 introduced indirect elections, that is a nominations process. You need to understand indirect election in India is still prevailing, and especially it is limited. For example, Rajya Sabha as well as the members. So that is the indirect election, that basically elected by the representative of the people. It enlarged the size of the legislative councils. It also enlarged the functions of the legislative councils and gave them the power to discuss the budget and addressing question to the executive. Now, in the next Indian Council Act of 1909, you need to understand this Monumental reform. This is also known as Monumental reforms. All of you are aware regarding the Bengal partition. Though the history says the Bengal partition was purely based on the administrative easiness, but the hidden agenda was also to provide a communal angle in this particular Bengal partition. Now, just after the Bengal partition, they introduced another act, Indian Council Act 1909. So direct election to the legislative councils, first time that is introduced, first attempt at introducing a representative and popular element. It also changed the name of the Central Legislative Council to Imperial Legislative Council. You can be asked question that by which act the Central Legislative Council is further known as the Imperial Legislative Council. It is Indian Council Act of 1892. The member of the Central Legislative Council was increased to 60 from 16. It also introduced a system of communal representation for Muslims by accepting the concept of separate electorate. Now, what is the understanding of separate electorate? That means the Muslim people can vote to the Muslim representative only. The Muslim people cannot vote to any other religious representative. So Indians for the first time in Viceroy's Executive Council, the name is Satyendranath Prasanna Sinha as the law member. So sometimes the question also comes regarding the name. Coming next, the Government of India Act of 1919, which is popularly known as the Montagu-Chelmsford reforms. The central subjects were demarcated and separated from those of provincial subjects. Today, which we simply call as the union list, state list as well as concurrent list, and at that time it used to be called as the central list and the provisional subjects. The scheme of dual government, that is a diarchy system, was introduced in the provincial subjects. Under the diarchy system, the provincial subjects were divided into two parts. One is transferred and another one is reserved. On the reserved subjects, governor was not responsible to the legislative council. The governor can make a prerogative discretion power. The act introduced for the first time bicameralism at the center. What do you mean by bicameralism? It has divided into two bodies. For example, today when we talk about the parliamentary system, we are having Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. So that is called as a bicameralism. So is the case for at the state we are having assembly, and also some states they do have the council. So that is also called as a bicameralism. So legislative council with 140 members, legislative council with 60 members were introduced, and direct elections is introduced. The act also required that 3 of the 6 members of the Viceroy's Executive Council, other than the Commander-in-Chief, were to be Indians. It also provided for the establishment of the Public Service Commission, preferably which we talk about at the union. We are having Union Public Service Commission, and at the state level we are having the different state public service commissions. Now finally, this is one of the landmark and very important act, that is a Government of India Act of 1935. This act provided for the establishment of All India Federation consisting of provinces, provincial states as units, though the federation never came into being. 3 lists for the first time introduced. Remember in the previous act only 2 lists, now 3 lists here it is introduced. Central list, the units into items, namely the federal list, the provincial list and the concurrent list. The federal list for the center consisted 59 items, the provincial list for the provinces consisted 54 items, and the concurrent list for the both consisted 36 items. Primarily you need to understand what you mean by the provincial list, then the federal list and the concurrent list. Now see, federal list means the federal legislative power has the authority to legislate into those matters, which means the provincial legislatures, they do not have the power to legislate. Similarly, provincial list means where the federal power cannot intervene into the provincial lawmaking process. So is the case for current list, means both the center, that means the federal as well as the provincial system, they can intervene. So the residuary powers, what do you mean by residuary powers? The residuary powers are basically those items which are not mentioned in any of the 3 lists, that is federal list or provincial list or the concurrent list. It was purely vested with the prerogative power of the Governor General. The act abolished the diarchy in provinces, introduced the provincial autonomy also. It provided adoption of diarchy at the center, introduced bicameralism in 6 out of 11 provinces. These 6 provinces were Assam, Bengal, Bombay, Bihar, Madras and the United provinces. It also prohibited the establishment of federal court, and also it abolished the Council of India. So that is all about the Government of India Act of 1935. You need to understand, as I have highlighted a couple of points here with the underlines. Please try to remember those points. Now the final act of the historical underpinnings, Indian Independence Act of 1947. Finally, it declared India as an independent sovereign state. It also established responsible government at both and center as well as provinces. It designated the Viceroy of India and the provincial governors as the constitutional, which is called as the nominal heads or normal heads. It assigned dual functions. One is constituent and legislative to the Constituent Assembly, and declared the Dominion Legislature as a sovereign body. You need to understand what is the meaning of this constituent and legislative power of the Constituent Assembly. Now, Constituent Assembly was primarily responsible to craft the constitution and also to show the vision how the India is going to administer, or how the India is going to run after the independence of 1947. Now, at the same time, the constituent power of the Constituent Assembly was primarily to look after the creation of our constitution. At the same time, the legislative power of the Constituent Assembly was primarily to look after the day-to-day business, or to create the laws, the rules at the particular time as the need may arise. With that, we have completed the historical underpinnings and its evolution. I'll again suggest to all of you, please try to revise, as these are the more factual informations, so you need to revise again and again. Couple of questions may come, and if it comes, then definitely those questions will be factual in nature from the prelims perspective primarily. Now, let us come to the salient features of Indian Constitution. Indian Constitution in many ways is unique in comparison to different constitutions of the world. Now, we are having two types of classification of the constitution. One is written constitution and the other one is unwritten constitution. So India falls under the category of the written constitution. Now, when the written constitution we say, the first thing that comes to our mind is that how it is written. So please do not misunderstand that unwritten constitutions are not written. They are also written, but there are certain provisions which clarifies which are written and which are not written. For example, all the written constitutions are codified. Now look at the example of India. Indian Constitution is codified in a way, the part 1 of Indian Constitution, which deals with the union and the states, the part 2 that deals with the citizenship. Now, how do you remember this particular point? Now, what is the first thing needed is the land or the territory, which deals by the part 1. Then second point is required the people, that is a part 2. Part 3 that deals with primarily the fundamental rights. If the people are already available, then what are the rights needed to them? So this is how our constitution is beautifully crafted. Now, in many ways, in this particular topic of salient features, I'm going to cover the unique features of Indian Constitution and a couple of brief about it. First thing, it is a preamble of the Constitution. Now, preamble is primarily, it's like a cover of a book. Now, all of you know the preamble, we the people of India having solemnly resolved to constitute India into a sovereign, democratic republic, and to secure to all its citizens justice, which is in the form of social, economical, and political, liberty of thoughts, expression, belief, faith, and worship. That's primarily referred to the religious freedom. We also have mentioned the equality of status and equality of opportunity, and to promote among all the fraternity, assuring the dignity of the individual and the unity of the nation. That's one of the uniqueness of Indian Constitution, the preamble of India. Now, the Constitution mentions that India is a democratic socialistic state. Now, many times you may find a question that what exactly is a democratic? Democratic primarily means it is ruled by the people. Socialist, which always refers to the welfare thing, though the socialist concept is very large and we do not have enough time to discuss about the socialistic features, so probably in other separate lectures I'll be covering what do you mean by socialism, or how does the socialistic feature that comes in a country, and especially referring to the constitution. So right to religious freedom, that is a secular state. Now many of the students, those who are dealing with the political science optional, so they need to understand in detail regarding the secularism. I'll just give you a brief about the secularism. Now you need to understand there is no official religion of India. So there is a concept called a secularism, Indian secularism and Western secularism. In Western secularism, what happens? The religion is completely separate from the state. But Indian secularism, there is no official religion of India. However, India accepts all religions. So that is the religious freedom which we are having, which is also a part of our fundamental right. Now we are having a democratic system. India is a republic. What is a republic? Republic means the head of the state is elected. All of you know that the president of India is the nominal head of the state and the prime minister of India is the actual head of the state. So both of them are elected. India is union of states, and this is very important. The union of states is somehow it is referred in the article 1 of Indian constitution, which states the India, that is Bharat, shall be union of states. So however, the meaning of the union of states is bit of different than the meaning of the union of states in the context of USA. Now when we India, we say union of states, which means it is the union who has created the states. However, when we understand the union of states from America perspective, United States of America, it is the states that came together and formed the union. So that is a uniqueness of Indian constitution, especially referring to the union of states meaning. We are also federal as well as unitary features. Most of the features of Indian constitutions are federal in nature, and also there are certain features which are unitary in nature. For example, there are certain perspective, or there are certain situations like emergency situations, which refers to the article 359, article 360. Those emergency features, if that is implemented, normally which is referred as the national emergency or the state emergency or the president's power or the financial emergencies, when those are promulgated, then it becomes automatically unitary in nature. Indian constitution also has blend of rigidity and flexibility. What do you mean by rigidity and flexibility? Rigidity and flexibility refers to how easily or how it is difficult to amend the constitution. Now when we are talking about the amendability of the constitution, which also is referred to the article 368, there are certain parts of the Indian constitution which is very rigid in nature, which means to amend those parts you need, let's for example, you need a minimum of not less than 2/3 members of represented voting. And for the flexibility means you just simply pass a law and a minimum 50% of the majority of the voting can also pass the law. There are certain countries where the constitution is purely rigid. For example, the USA. To amend the constitution of USA, you need minimum 3/4 majority. We are also having certain uniqueness, that fundamental rights of our constitution. All of you know that we are having 6 types of fundamental rights, which is also unique to India. We also have the fundamental duties, article 51A, that refers to the fundamental duties. Coming next, the point number 11 related to the bicameral union parliament, which is basically also known as the bicameralism, that is Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha. Now many a times you may be also getting the question regarding how India has selected this parliamentary system. If we talk about the systematic perspective, generally we always focus on 2 types of system. One is presidential system and the other one is parliamentary system. Like USA is a presidential system where the head of the state is president who has a lot of power. India is a parliamentary system. We have followed the British system where we also have a president. However, the actual power lies upon the Prime Minister of India. Now adult suffrage, which related to the voting power, earlier it was 21 years. Now every Indian with a minimum age of 18 is now eligible to vote. Now in India we are also having a single citizenship. In USA you know that there are dual citizenship. For the federal there is one, for the state there is another. but in India there is a single citizenship. This citizenship also you can refer to the part 2 of Indian Constitution, where you will be also getting to know how Indians can acquire the citizenship or the various provisions into it. Now in India we are having the integrated and independent judiciary. Now this independent judiciary, for example, if I can refer to Article 50 of Indian Constitution, where it has clearly stated that the judiciary shall be separate from the executive. Now in the integrated means, unlike our parliament, unlike our legislature and executive, which is also federal in nature, our judiciary is integrated in nature. That is the Supreme Court and High Courts. You cannot say that Supreme Courts are for the country and High Courts are for the states. That is not true at all. So our judiciary is integrated. Now judicial review is very important. The Supreme Court has already highlighted that judicial review is a part of basic structure. Basically, if I can refer you the Marbury versus Madison case of United States, the judicial review that came into picture. Judicial review is basically the power of the higher judiciaries, primarily the Supreme Court and the High Court, to review the laws. Now emergency provisions, already I have referred to those emergency provisions like national emergency, state emergency, as well as the financial emergency, which are also unique to our country. A constitution drawn from several sources. Sometimes there is a question that is our constitution a patchwork? So it is not exactly. Our constitution has been referred to various several sources, and I'm going to discuss a couple of sources in detail. You can also note down these sources while pausing the video. Now the Constitution of United States, from this particular country we have referred our preamble, the fundamental rights, federal structure of the government, electoral college, independence of judiciary and separation of power, judicial reviews, president as supreme commander of armed forces, and equal protection of law. So that is referred from USA. From British Constitution we have referred parliamentary form of government, the idea of single citizenship, the idea of the rule of law, the idea of writs basically Article 32, like for example habeas corpus, mandamus, quo warranto, certiorari, and prohibition. Article 32 is also known as the fundamental right of all the fundamental rights, the institution of speaker and his role, the law making procedure, and procedure established by law. The Canadian Constitution we have referred the quasi-federal form of government, distribution of powers between the center and the state, and the residual power retained by the center of the government. Already I have highlighted what is a residual powers. Residual powers means those items which are not mentioned in the any of the three lists, that is union list, state list, as well as concurrent list. From the Irish Constitution, from the Ireland, we have sourced directive principle of state policy, DPSP, nomination of members to the Rajya Sabha, method of election to the president. From the French Constitution we have referred the republic, the ideals of the liberty, equality, the fraternity in the preamble. Remember the French Revolution. From the Australian Constitution we have referred freedom of trade and commerce within the country and between the states, power of the national legislature to make laws for implementing the treaties even on the matters outside normal federal jurisdiction, the concurrent list that comes from the Australian Constitution, Constitution of Soviet Union, USSR, before 1990 it was not Russia, it was USSR, the fundamental duties under Article 51A, a constitutionally mandated planning commission to oversee the development of the economy. Now we do not have a planning commission, that is replaced by the Niti Aayog. Indian Constitution, then we are having the Constitution of South Africa. We have sourced procedure of amendment, election of Rajya Sabha members. From the Constitution of Germany we have referred emergency provisions, the suspension of fundamental rights during the emergency. From the Constitution of Russia we have sourced the fundamental duties. Also India, the idea of the social, economical, and political justice in the preamble. From the Constitution of Japan we have sourced procedure established by law. And finally from the Government of India Act of 1935 we have sourced the federal scheme, emergency provisions, the Public Service Commission, Office of the Governor, Judiciary, and the administrative details. So I have given you a comprehensive list of all the sources which are referred and drawn from various constitutions of the world. I will again suggest you people to go back uh, to the video and try to note down all the points which I have referred. Now with that particular note, we are in a end of the concluding, where we have discussed the historical underpinnings as well as its salient features of the Indian constitutions. I hope you have enjoyed the video and you have learned many new points. If you need any kind of support and help, please do let me know. I'm looking forward to see you again in the lecture number 3. Thank you so much.